So when we talk about entitlements, which is a word that we'll hear a lot in the coming months, entitlements means, am I entitled to get a building permit without this additional discretionary process that a planning department oversees? And that discretionary planning process, the entitlement process, is very slow, it's very expensive, it's very subjective. It's very hard to know when you start that process if you're going to get a yes or a no at the end of it. And that stops a lot of people in California from building homes. Because a lot of the land is not zoned in a way that works economically for the sorts of projects that could be built. And so developers, builders have to say, I'd like some changes to the zoning. I'd like a little bit more height, or I'd like a little bit, lower parking requirements, or whatever it might be. And then I could do a building. But if we don't fix the entitlement process for the rebuild areas, it's going to be a year or more before a lot of people can even get to the starting line of asking for
building to what it was there.
There are basically two big sets of rules that govern what you can build. There is the zoning, which describes
if it's single family, if it's commercial,
what we call the use. Yeah. That's right. It's both the use and also the envelope, the shape of the building that's allowed. Can it be tall, or does it have to be short? Can it be all the way to the sidewalk, or does it have to be set back? Those are zoning sorts of rules. And then there's building code. And building code is more about, is it structurally safe? Will it stand up in an earthquake or a windstorm? Is it fireproof or not? How many toilets do you have? How many sinks do you have? Those are building code issues. And the building code changes every several years. And zoning code changes more slowly than that. But most of the buildings that were in a place like Altadena and frankly, Pacific Palisades were built under old code regimes that if they were to be rebuilt today, would have to look very different. They'd have to have different kinds of windows, they'd have different heights, they'd have different configurations overall. And one of the big challenges to rebuilding is, if I say you lost your house, you can rebuild exactly what was there. Your house might have been from 1935, and the building code of today is different than that, and so there has to be some negotiation about that. And the thing that really causes processes to get stuck is that kind of uncertainty, that kind of negotiation, where we say we'll issue an executive order that says you can rebuild exactly what was there. But people haven't fully thought through the conflicts with other laws and other rules that represents. And our our bureaucratic culture in California and in Los Angeles in particular is what one might call a culture of no, where the default answer to everything is no, you can't do that. If there's a conflict, try again. And that's distinct from other places like, Chicago is a great example of this. I would say their building culture is a culture of yes, where if you say, I'm trying to do this, can you help me? The bureaucracy there tends to be much more thinking about solutions rather than thinking about how to stop you. And I worry that our culture of no is going to get in the way of the sort of creative thinking that we're going to need to move through that uncertainty as we rebuild.
Do you think it will cost a lot more to build with the current code versus what it was there with the old code, like from the...
Yeah, very much so, very much so. I mean, every so often we do these code updates, and they're well-intentioned. For example, California has what we call Title 24, which are its energy efficiency requirements and accessibility requirements. So it says, you must have certain kinds of insulation, and you must have, windows that provide for certain, UV filtering and things like this. And every year or every so often, we ratchet them up, and we just think, let's get a little bit more out of the industry. And we're at a point today where it is significantly more expensive than it was to build even 5-6 years ago, and vastly more expensive than it was to build back in the 80s or the 70s when a lot of the homes in Pacific Palisades were built, and vastly more expensive than what was the case when a lot of those homes were built. Now, A lot of the things that we have ratcheted up in the building code that have added cost are good. These are fire life safety considerations that make buildings safer, make them more resilient, make them more energy efficient. Some of them are a lot of cost without a lot of benefit, because during the code update process, it's really a bunch of regulators and engineers who get together and say, wouldn't it be nice if? And there isn't a lot of input from the industry on the other side saying that would be nice, but it's going to triple our costs. How about we do it this way? So that's something that I'm hopeful is addressed in the current legislative session. There are some bills that are on the dockets right now that would create a better conversation around code updates, that would invite architects and engineers from the private sector into the state.
And do you think there's a difference between building Palisades and Altadena? Is there a difference?
I think we are going to see two different processes play out. One, both communities had a bigger variety of household wealth profiles and income profiles than you might think. I mean, it's easy to say Pacific Palisades was rich and Altadena was middle class, but there were fantastically wealthy people in Altadena and there were very middle class people in Pacific Palisades who've been impacted by this. The biggest difference, I think, is going to be that one is City of LA and one is County of LA, and it's two different bureaucracies that are going to be overseeing the rebuild.